Hello and welcome to the Bhagavatam. Today we're going to be reading from the third canto, and we're on chapter numbers 12 to 14. So there's a lot in this. Today the topic really is about manifesting and how it sometimes goes wrong, and how sometimes we don't even stop to question, why is it that we want to manifest something? Like all of us are manifesting something, right? You're manifesting a job, a partnership, a relationship. You're manifesting everything that happens in your life is in fact a manifestation. A manifestation of what? Do you have to believe in some law of attraction, or do you have to believe in some new age mumbo jumbo? No. Whatever you have in your life or don't have is a manifestation. What is it a manifestation of? It's a manifestation of your consciousness. Now, I don't mean your pure consciousness as in the soul. I mean the consciousness of your mind, body, organism that you live in, the egoic mind. It is a manifestation of where your dominant thoughts, emotions, desires are at. And what you've been focusing on starts to show up in your life. The key operative word is focusing. What have you been focusing on? Have you been focusing on all that's going wrong in your life? Have you been focusing on all the things that aren't working out for you? Have you been focusing on the problems of the world? Have you been focusing on what you don't have? And then at the same time wishing you had, and maybe at some level wishing the problems of the world were not there, or that things were better. But remember, what was your dominant thought? What was the one that was most pervasive? What was the one that had the most emotion behind it? What was the one that had your greatest attention? That is what will show up in your life. Why? Most people think there's this mysterious force out there that somehow things are happening. The universe gives you what you desire. That if you simply have some vision board or some such thing, things will happen. I'm sorry, no. Lots of people, hundreds, millions have read books like The Secret and thought that they could manifest their dreams. And a few did, but the majority of them never went from being wherever they were, broke or without a relationship or whatever else. Not much changed for them. They had the belief, but not necessarily the deep understanding of it. The deep understanding is actually there in the Vedas. And the Vedas talk about people who learn to meditate. Now, what is meditation? Meditation is not about some posture, nor is it about a particular guru or a particular practice. It is about a very simple thing. It's called dhyan. Dhyan means focus. Where is your focus? Where is your attention? Wherever you repeatedly focus is what's going to show up. If we took that to the extreme, if somebody focused on God, God would show up. But if you focus on the things of the world, well, then that's what shows up or doesn't show up. If you focus on the lack of what you have, then that's what shows up. So be very careful. What are you thinking? What are you speaking? And what are you feeling? All of that combined is going to determine your focus. And over time, that's what's going to show up in the world. So it's the combination of these factors, thoughts, words, emotions, focus, and time. These 5 things together will make it show up in your life. Try it out. See what's been going on up till now and see what you'd like to create in the future. But before you go about trying to create or manifest anything, I'd like to ask a very key question. Why? Why do you want what you want? Is your thought that it will make you happy? Have you checked with others? Did it make them happy? Do you feel it will make you fulfilled? that will make you feel loved, that will make you feel special, that maybe it'll make people will look up to you. And if so, then what? There are so many areas that we leave unexamined, and it is the unexamined areas that then cause us the greatest suffering, because we haven't thought it through. So really think it through. Why do I want what I want? Because in the end, if you think about it, even if I get everything I want, I have the most amazing partner, I have all the stuff I want in my life, I have everything going for me, as they say, I'm still going to lose it all. I can't take it with me. I will die. Or that partner will die, or things will get old, or things, this body will get old. Sooner or later, my ability to enjoy whatever I have will diminish. My senses will weaken, and I will not be able to have this whatever pleasure I was able to get. When you were 20s, you had a certain level of pleasure that you could engage in, and as you got older, 30s, 40s, 50s, if you're there, you'll notice that came down. Diminishing returns, the law of diminishing returns. That's what's at play here. Pleasure is short-lived. And the pursuit for pleasure is like a whiff. It's a moment. It's a moment in time. You feel this moment of pleasure, this wonderful meal you went out for. Yeah, you spent a lot of money, you went to the best of restaurants, but an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours later, it's over. And now you're on to something else, and then something else, and then something else, and therein comes the rat race, and therein comes that hamster wheel. Therein comes the place where we are chasing and chasing and chasing the next thing, the next pleasure, the next thing that we think will have some substance and meaning, but it never does. We're like the person chasing a mirage in the desert. We never get there. So it's not about being negative. It's about saying, okay, let's take out all the stuff that isn't really working, that isn't really fulfilling me. Let's eliminate. Let's simplify. And then when we've simplified, let's see what remains. So if I simplify and I move away the senses which only give me temporary pleasure, and if I move away from the mind which only might give me a little pleasure but gives me a lot of pain and a lot of chatter and criticism and all of that, then what's left? If the stuff of the world doesn't satisfy me, and even an ideal partner sometimes, can be a lot to deal with, what remains? What remains? That's the key issue. And that is the part where we then come to the real purpose of meditation, the real purpose of spirituality, is we come to what remains, that which you are. Learning to find happiness in that which you are. Learning to find love in that which you are. Learning to find fulfillment in that which you are. And from that which you are, learning to connect to a higher power, a source, a God. Learning to understand what the meaning of that is and how to attain that. That is the point of the Bhagavatam. So we've been reading the Bhagavatam now for some time, and let's get on to the next part of it. Bhagavatam, Canto 3, chapters number 12 to 14. Let's get started here. So this is the creation of the Kumaras and others. Now this is about Brahma. Some of you might know about Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. They're often been referred to as the Trimurti. T-R-I, Trimurti. Trimurti means the three different facets or aspects, or three primary demigods that are in charge of this universe. Brahma stands for let me show you some more pictures first, and then we'll come to it. Okay, so Brahma stands for the creator, one who creates the universe and everything in it. Vishnu maintains, and Shiva ultimately destroys the universe. Those were older versions. These are modern day versions. I don't know why they show people looking so angry, but this is sort of a more modern version. This is an artist's depiction of Brahma sitting on his lotus with 4 heads, Why 4 heads? Maybe we'll talk about it sometime. And there's another picture of Brahma. And let's see. So here's what happens. Brahma's job is to create or manifest the universe and all the living entities in it. Now, as he does that, he's also got to make an arrangement whereby we can become entangled in this universe, where we can become caught up in it, because we've got to go through certain learning experiences here. We've got to go through certain aspects of our own karma and of the growth that we came here to have. So, along with creating the universe, he creates a number of other things. Self-deception, fear of death, right? Anger after frustration. I don't know if you experience these things, but most of us do, right? Anger after frustration, false ownership, forgetfulness of one's real identity. These are all really important points to ponder. We all delude ourselves. We're deluded by there's so many things we don't want to see or think about or feel. Like, for example, people eat meat, but they don't want to actually see the videos of the animals as they're being slaughtered. They don't want to. It's self-deception. We don't want to know what really goes into the things we eat or the things we wear or the places where our nice, pretty iPhones are created. We don't necessarily want to know the details of what goes on behind the scenes, and that's all part of self-deception. We don't want to necessarily know, how our country treats other countries, what happens in war, what happens for those. It's very easy to tell a soldier, oh, thank you for your service, but step in his shoes, go out and kill a bunch of people. No, that's easier to just sit back at home. Self-deception, right? So many ways that we deceive ourselves. We think others are happier than we are. All of that. Fear of death. We all live with that. So we try to be safe. But can you really be safe? Can anyone be safe? Isn't death something that can happen at any time, at any minute? But we don't want to think about it. We don't want to live with that awareness. We don't want that to be in our mind. We want to just go out and eat, drink, and be merry. Anger after frustration. Yeah, we all feel that one. False ownership. False ownership is this idea that something is mine. In reality, nothing is mine. I will die and leave everything behind. So how is it mine? I'm here for a short while. I have a few things. And then at the end of that, I have to give them up. So I'm claiming ownership over something that indeed is never mine. Forgetfulness of one's real identity. And that is that we've forgotten who we are. We've forgotten the real self. We've forgotten our soul. And we've gotten wrapped up into thinking that this body is me. That I'm this, that this face represents me, that I am this particular age, or I'm this gender, or I'm any of these things that, I'm from this country, this nationality, this is my history, these are the things that happened to me. No, this is all false identity. And that false identity has us trapped. Some people call it trauma, some people call it, but whatever you call it, it's false identity. We're identifying with that which is not our real self. Our real self, our soul, is sitting quietly witnessing the drama of our life and being quite amused, like watching a movie. And nobody's turning to find out who's behind this. So Brahma reflected on what he had created, all these different ways in which we're going to go through the experience of life. And then he saw his action as sinful, and he sort of thought about purifying himself. So that's the sign of a person who is reflective and who recognizes what mistakes he's made. And so he began to ponder on that, and he purified himself through meditation. That's kind of a helpful thing to do for most of us, to really look at where we're messing up in our lives and how we can do differently or do better. Now, Brahma had 4 sons, Brahma being the creator of the universe. So remember, creator in Hinduism does not mean God. It's simply an empowered being just like you and I, who's been empowered with the ability of creating universes. Just like a CEO might delegate somebody to create a franchise of a particular or a branch of their company. So in the same way, Brahma is the being who's been given that task. Now he has 4 sons, and those 4 sons are known as the Kumaras. Kumara actually means boy. These 4 sons of his are highly evolved, enlightened beings. They chose not to become entangled in worldly life. Now, Brahma wanted them to bear progeny, to have children, to be married, to have a family. But they refused. And because they refused, Brahma became very angry. And he, in his anger, tried to suppress it. Now, you know what happens when you try to curb anger, right? It doesn't go away. It gets shoved down in your own body. It goes somewhere. It's not, you can't just let it go like that. So he tried to curb his anger, and it came out from between his eyebrows. Now, Brahma, being a manifester, a creator of the highest level, anything he would think would just manifest. So here he manifests through his eyebrows a child. This child was blue and red in color, and he named it Rudra. Rudra has been imagined by some artists as looking like this. Now, keep in mind these are artist renditions and, anybody's guess. But we're going by the Bhagavatam, the ancient texts that were written by enlightened beings, scholars, people with the highest level of awareness that have ever lived on this planet. So we're going by their word. And of course, we're trying to imagine what it is they're saying. Sometimes we don't get it. Sometimes we do. Because they're talking about different eras, different times, different planets, different situations, where they're beyond our scope of understanding, beyond even our imagination. And so we're trying to do the best we can to figure it out. Because what goes on in other planets, in other realms, in other dimensions is definitely not something we can understand easily. So here we are trying to figure it out. But they're woven within these stories and narratives are tremendous learnings, and that's what we want to get to the heart of. So anyways, Rudra was created from Brahma in that sense, and Rudra was given the following places to live. The heart. So you know how we can get angry? Yeah, that's where Rudra is, in the heart, when it becomes angry. When we get angry at someone, we hate them because we used to love them, but now we hate them. And in the senses, you know how our senses can get caught up with our anger? With the air of life, the prana, the breath, the sky, the air, the fire, the water, earth, sun, moon, and austerity. My God, he gave him a lot of places to live. So what does this mean practically? Rudra is present. So Rudra is the manifestation of Brahma's anger, right? So Rudra is present when a person breathes rapidly due to anger. Like that, right? We breathe angry, you're angry. Or when the sky is overcast and roars with anger. Or when the wind blows fiercely. Or when the seawater is infuriated by the wind. Or the fire is ablaze and inundates the earth. In all these ways, we find the presence of anger. Anger is very much a part of our lives. But how do we curb it? How do we learn to calm it? That's a big part of the journey of Rudra. Rudra then learns, as we'll find out in a few moments, how to manage anger. So Rudra was instructed at first to populate the universe, because Brahma had just created this universe and he wanted it to be populated with beings, and Rudra started to manifest offspring. His unlimited offspring resembled him in features and strength and furious nature. And they attempted, because they were born out of anger, so that's the consciousness, right? Behind the creation, or whatever you create, is your consciousness. If you create something from a place of anger, then that anger is now invested within that creation. So for example, if you're eating food in an angry state, that anger is now in the food that you're eating or feeding your family. And it's going to produce more anger. The animal you're eating is infused with its emotions of anger and adrenaline that was pumping in as it felt fear and hate and anger towards the people who were killing it. And that's now coming into you. So similarly, our consciousness infects whatever we do. If, for example, if I give a gift to somebody, but I give it with a sense of, I want something back from you, then they will sense that. that there is an expectation, that this is not given with purity, this is not given with real love, but this is an act of exchange. It is an exchange. I give you, you give me. So there is, our consciousness goes into everything that we do. And when you manifest something, if you manifest that something from a sense of, let's say I want to be very wealthy, and I manifest that from a place of, I want to be wealthy so that I can impress people and I can show what a great person I am, and I can overcome the adversities of my childhood, which I grew up in poverty, well, then it's going to show up in your creation. Your creation is going to perhaps be very flashy, perhaps you'll be very arrogant, perhaps you will think that you've achieved so much and you're superior to others as a backlash from your earlier experience. It's not from a pure place. A pure place of manifesting, let's say, wealth would be, I understand that everything belongs to God. I will generate and manifest abundance, and I will share it with others. That's a godly thought. But the other is an egoic thought. So it's up to you. What is the consciousness you're bringing to that which you manifest? Why are you wanting it? And what is the consciousness you're bringing to it? So when Brahma saw that Rudra was attempting to devastate the entire universe and even starting to attack Brahma, he instructed Rudra, his son, born from his anger, to stop generating such living entities and engage in penance that would please God and bring benedictions upon him. Rudra paused, listened, and took the advice of his very wise father, Brahma. And so he went to the forest to perform austere penance and meditation. So this is the way of learning. You know, sometimes people say, don't tell me anything. Okay, fine. But how will you learn, right? If you want to truly learn and grow, and if you want to be a better human being, and if you want to improve yourself, you've got to be able to give up your own ego that I know everything. I don't need to be told anything. I need to be able to have a little humility. I need to have a little bit of willingness to realize that I'm not the knower of it all. There are other people who are masters at their own field, who know things that I don't know, who might see things that I don't see. And I need to pause and listen. And maybe they'll make sense if I do. So Rudra went to the forest to perform austere penance and meditation. Why? Because meditation calms the angry beast within yourself. Because it takes out that anger from within you, from deep within you, and it changes your consciousness. It is not about trying to change the world, as many people think, or changing the circumstances in our life. We all struggle to do that. We just struggle to change the circumstances of our life. But that never helps, because wherever you go, circumstances are going to show up. And those circumstances, you will deal with them with the same level of consciousness, the same level of either depression or anger or hate or prejudice or whatever it is that might be in your heart. But as you change your consciousness, the experience changes. As you change the way you think, as you change the way you feel, as the way you change what you process in your mind and the way you experience life, then the experience itself changes. It often comes by not resisting things. When I resist something, it persists. I keep experiencing that. But when I drop the resistance and I surrender, or I open my mind, or I listen, or I learn, then suddenly I'm able to perceive things in a different way. So, Brahma then continued, and he was going to populate the earth, so he had 10 more sons, and through them he was hoping to have more children. He also had a daughter. There's a very bizarre story about Brahma, who has a daughter named Vak, whom he was very attracted to for sex, although she was not so inclined. Now, of course, Brahma is by himself. He's got nobody else, and so he is trying to find some pleasure somewhere, as every human being does. And in this particular instance, he is finding himself attracted to his own daughter. This was such an unheard of act that no Brahma, there are thousands of Brahmas, every universe has a different Brahma, but no Brahma had ever engaged in such an act, or thought of such a thought, or walked such a path. And so he was chastised by the sages of his time and his sons. They reminded him that he was the most powerful being in the universe and that no Brahma before him had ever behaved like this. And they reproached him for not controlling his desire. See, what makes us human is the ability to control our desire, to control our mind, to control our thoughts and our actions, particularly our actions, right? And when someone fails to do that, that results in that person being sent to jail or being chastised or punished in some way. There is consequences, especially when your actions encroach upon another. I would say that the most important law in the universe is exactly that, the law of free will, that you do not encroach on somebody else's free will. If you take that which is theirs, that's stealing. If you encroach on their body, then that is rape or in some way abuse, right? So you don't encroach on someone else's free will. You have free will to do whatever you want as long as you don't encroach on the free will of others. And they further instructed Brahma, saying that his actions would be followed by people in general. Brahma in that instance became very ashamed of his actions, and he gave up his body. There was a tremendous sense of shame there. He was not willing to live with that. So Brahma, again, keep in mind, is not God. He is a person, a being just like you and I, who has become very influential, very powerful, and been given great mystical abilities with which to manifest the universe. So that was his downfall in that particular case. And this can happen to all of us. We may get so much power, we may get so much wealth, so much fame, that we lose our common sense, that we lose our guiding principles, we lose our morality, we lose the sense of what is right and wrong. And so even someone as great as Brahma could do that. It's a great learning for us to take away, that we too are not free from messing up, from falling down, from doing things that are not acceptable. But we must face the consequences of that and take, not try to run away from it, but actually face it. And we must have compassion and empathy for those who do go astray, because we're all messed up, really. None of us is perfect. All of us are subject to gross failure. There's, in every which way, there is not a single person who can say that they have not messed up somewhere, not done something wrong. It reminds me of the story of where Christ was approached by this group of people who wanted to stone a woman who had committed adultery. And they said, Master, is it okay? And he said, no. He said, no, he didn't say no. He said, let he who is without sin cast the first stone. Is there anyone? And so nobody threw a stone, because they all knew every one of them had committed some kind of sin. Every one of them was flawed and imperfect and messed up. And so none of them stoned. Then he told that woman, go and don't do it again. So the point being that compassion is so important. So important, because when you realize you're not perfect, then how can somebody else be perfect? When you realize you've got flaws, then how would you think that somebody else doesn't? We all do. Let us not project onto each other our own imperfections. And because we're trying to be better doesn't mean we are better. I don't think there ever comes a time when we are perfect. We will never be perfect. What is perfect is our soul. And as human beings, we will always be imperfect. We will always be flawed. And that is deliberate, so that we may learn to develop compassion. And compassion is just the beginning. Some people think compassion is the end. No, compassion is just the beginning. The beginning of what? Of unconditional love. It is there that you learn unconditional love, through compassion. That's the beginning. That's the road. Because to have unconditional love, you have to accept the fact that we are flawed and imperfect, and be kind with yourself. I heard a song when I was a kid, and it said, "Be not too hard, for life is short, and nothing is given to man." Joan Baez, I think, was singing it. I don't know who wrote it. But yeah, it's that same idea. So Brahma was very ashamed and gave up his own body at that time. And another time, another manifestation of Brahma was thinking of creating the universe. At this point, he created the 4 Vedas. So much knowledge containing all varieties of knowledge became manifest from his mouth. He then created the 5th Veda, the Puranas, the histories of time memorial of all the great beings that have lived on different universes, in different planets, in different dimensions, because he could see past, present, and future. He also created medical science, military art, musical art, and architectural science, all from the Vedas. Now you might think they were primitive people that lived on this planet thousands of years ago, but that is not true. The Vedas tell us of highly evolved civilizations that lived on this very planet, the Earth. What to say of other universes? And somehow our historians and our archaeologists would like to weave a different story, but that's just a story. It is not true. Brahma also manifested the alphabet, the Gayatri Mantra, and much more. He then contemplated how the population should be increased, and now he manifested another being, Manu. This was known as Swayambhuva Manu, who was manifest directly from Brahma, and his wife, Shatarupa, his queen, and together they populated the world with their progeny. Now, we come to the part where Sri Krishna had left the planet, and now his dear friend Vidur was traveling, and he had come to speak with the great sage Maitreya. So he was speaking to Maitreya, and over the last few sessions we've been listening to this conversation between Maitreya and Vidura. So at this point Vidura has some further questions. He starts to ask about Manu. So he asked Maitreya to, tell him some more. He says, please tell me more about what was going on, and how did this manifestation, this universe start to take place, and all the people in it. After all, today we have 8 billion people on this planet, and we've never had even 2 billion, until about the early 1900s, and 1 billion by around the 1800s. But till that point, we didn't have anything like the populations we see today. Now, in the beginning of time, Brahma is contemplating how to even begin to get this whole creation into flow. But here we're looking at too many, too much. I don't know where that's going, but we're in the opposite situation here, as we recall Brahma trying to, set things up to populate the universe. So now, as you heard earlier, he manifested a being called Manu. And Manu and his wife come to Brahma, and they ask how they might execute their duty and serve him. And Brahma says, I am very pleased with you, and I desire all blessings for both of you and your wife. You have without reservation surrendered yourself unto me with your heart for my instructions. Now that's the way of learning, by the way. When you go to someone to learn without reservation, where you surrender yourself with your heart, and are willing to hear the instructions of that person, especially if you're going to a spiritual teacher or a guide, and you're willing to take seriously what that person is trying to teach you. We all think we know, but we have to be a blank slate. We have to be an empty cup to be able to receive new information. If we think we know, then we'll never learn. Socrates said it very beautifully. He says, to know that you do not know is the greatest step to knowledge. So it's with that mood that Manu and his wife are coming to Brahma. And Brahma says to them, your example is quite befitting a son in relation with his father. This sort of adoration for the superior is required. One who is beyond the limit of envy and who is sane accepts the order of his father with great delight and executes it to his full capacity. Now, of course, this is with the understanding that that father is an evolved being. That father has learned through the years. That nowadays it's not been happening as much. But in the past, you will see, because people devoted themselves not just to a particular company and working for 30 years for a particular corporation, but they devoted themselves to bettering themselves. I remember even the time of my grandfather, incredibly wise person, and my grandmother as well. Incredibly wise. They spent a good part of their life in studying these texts and in chanting and in meditating and in doing yoga and so many things that helped them improve as a human being. And so when you came in their presence, you felt that kindness, you felt that sweetness, you felt their wisdom. It was tangible and palpable. So when you have someone like that, and that's how it's been for generations, it's wonderful to be able to open your heart, open your mind, and learn from them. So Brahma is telling Manu now, I ask you to beget children like yourself in the womb of your wife. Rule the world in pursuance of the principles of dharma, yajna, and bhakti. Right? So dharma is what is required. Dharma is the guiding principles on how to live our lives. And that is what is taught to us in the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavatam. He says, if you can give proper protection to the living beings in the material world, that will be the best service for me. Proper protection. Think about that. If a king or a ruler protects the subjects, that's the most important thing, their safety. Then guides them to the ultimate welfare of life, which is to be able to understand who they are and who is God. And to be able to find God. In whichever way, it does not have to be a particular religion or a sect. It doesn't have to be this religion or that religion or any other. It is that to set people on that path, to guide them, that is what is best for them. I know in today's time everybody wants to be politically correct and they don't want to mix church and state and things like that. But I think it's very important to be able to go to any and all religions and find the beauty in them. Recently it was Christmas and we went over to not only the temple and to go with the kirtan and all of that, but also to the church for the Mass. I think it's very important. We can learn from each other. We don't have to limit ourselves to a particular thing because God doesn't belong to a religion. God doesn't belong to any set of people or any group of any kind. God is utterly free of all of this stuff. These systems are only ways in which we begin to understand God. And if we can tap into each other's ways, we learn more. So then Brahma continues, when the Supreme Being sees you as a good protector of the conditioned soul, certainly he will be very pleased with you. He is the ultimate self, and therefore one who does not satisfy him certainly neglects his own interests. So by satisfying God, we actually satisfy our own interests, not by chasing the things of the world. That never happens. But by satisfying God, we satisfy ourselves. It is said, just as when you water the root of a tree, you water the entire tree. But if you just watered the leaves, well, then you wouldn't, the whole tree, none of the tree would actually get watered. Right? So when you water, you must get to the root. What is the root of all existence? And that is God. Now something else was going on at this time as Brahma was instructing Manu. The earth was inundated by a deluge and merged in water. Now these stories of the deluge and of the of a flood and of even the ice age are there in all civilizations, whether you go to South America or you go to Africa or you go to the to Egypt or you go over wherever you go, you're going to find these stories. The Middle East, there are stories of a deluge. And recently I was watching a show called it was on Netflix, a Graham Hancock show, and it was called why am I forgetting it now? Yeah. Sorry. Graham Hancock on Netflix. Take a look. Check it out. Anyways, they were talking about how these stories of a deluge are there in almost all cultures. Ancient Apocalypse, that was the name. All right, got it now. So now Brahma started meditating on how to save the earth. And because he couldn't quite figure it out, he sought the help of the Almighty, prayed to God. And at that moment, a small form, not larger than the tip of the thumb, in the shape of a boar, emerged from his nostril. The boar then became the size of a great elephant in the sky. It roared tumultuously, and the sound echoed in all directions. That boar was Varaha. We're going to learn a little bit more about Varaha. This is a manifestation of Vishnu. And Vishnu comes in different forms. Sometimes as a human, sometimes as an animal, sometimes as a fish. All different forms, as a tortoise. It takes various incarnations. Why? Because he can. He wants to show you he can do amazing feats without necessarily being human-like in any species at all. Anyways, this boar that had become like a huge giant boar, like an elephant, was flying in the sky, moving its tail, its hair quivering. Its glance was luminous, and it scattered the clouds with its hooves and glittering white tusks. It was, in fact, the Supreme Being, Vishnu, and was therefore transcendental. Yet because it had the body of a hog, it searched for the earth. It was now looking for the earth. Where is the earth? Because the earth had become inundated by water and was going to bring the earth out of that water. So it was searching for the earth by smell. It then dived into the water like a giant mountain, dividing the waters into two huge waves. When it saw the earth, the resting place for all living beings, it lifted it up on its tusks. Here's a picture that might help you imagine that. At that time, as he was lifting it out of the water, the demon Hiranyaksha attacked Varaha, the boar. And Hiranyaksha was killed instantly by Varaha with his tusks within the water. It says here, as a lion kills an elephant. Now, who was this Hiranyaksha? And why did he come to do battle with Varaha? Well, we're going to learn all about that. A part of it this time and part of it the next part of the Bhagavatam. So then, as Varaha, now having killed Hiranyaksha, emerged with the earth on its tusks, it appeared very splendid. It then suspended the earth on the edge of its curved white tusks and placed it in its orbit. It then assumed a bluish complexion. Brahma and the sages who were observing knew that he was none other than the Supreme Godhead Vishnu and offered him all respect and prayers of glorification. They then said, who can refuse to hear the nectar of narrations about the Supreme Godhead, who can deliver one from all material pangs? So this really speaks to the real importance of the text in the Bhagavatam, is that to understand that God, can take any form God likes. God's not just some old man sitting up in the clouds, but can take any possible form, is there to protect the earth and cares about each of us. And finally, is ready to annihilate any miscreants that may be causing havoc on earth. Ultimately, they shall be wiped out, as has always happened. And of course, they keep coming back again. There's no doubt about that. But in the meantime, you get some respite and you get a chance for Dharma to grow, and for the people who want to do things that are dharmic, that are part of the way of God, it gives them a chance to prosper and thrive. So anyways, this battle goes on. Battle is about choice. We all have the choice. See, when there's free will, there is choice. And what is the choice? The choice is whether I want to follow the ways of God or I don't want to, or I want to rebel from God, whether I want to be a servant of God or whether I want to try to be God. These are the things. I want to be the enjoyer of everything, or I want to know that I am for the enjoyment of God. These are the choices we're looking at. When you realize that you really aren't enjoying anything, that you've got it all upside down, then that is the time where you come to a place of surrender. And in that surrender, you realize that you realize God, and God comes within you. And as that presence of God is felt within you, the whole world begins to transform. And it's suddenly the suffering that you had, the tension, the stress, the anxiety, the fear fades away. You can basically live your life in two ways: out of fear or out of faith. What is faith? Faith is not a belief in something, it is a trust. A trust that God has your back, that you are protected, that you are safe, that you are okay. Why are you protected and safe? Because you are. That's the relationship you have with God. But what have you done to deserve that? It's not about deserving anything. But why would God care about you? Because God does, about every one of us. But are we willing to care? That's really the question. Are we willing to connect? Are we willing to tune in? Are we willing to receive that care? I can give you all the care, but if you reject it, I can give you all the wisdom, but if you reject it, I can give you all of everything, but if you reject it, and then you keep complaining, as many people do when they go into this victim consciousness, then no matter what comes to them, nothing's good enough. Nothing's will ever stop, because they're stuck in a loop of feeling that there's nothing there for them. They're not protected, not cared for. That they're just this doomsday thinking, doom and gloom. But when you have trust, then everything changes. So you can live in fear or you can live in faith. Faith meaning trust. Trust that God has your back. And when you develop that deep, unshakable trust, then nothing in the world bothers you. Really. I mean, it might bother you for a moment because you have a body, you have a mind, it's going to get some reaction. But at the deepest core, you know it's all going to pass and it will all be okay. And very often the things that are bad sometimes turn out to be good, as we're going to see now in the Bhagavatam. Continue with Canto 3, chapter 14. So Vidur then inquired about the reason for the fight between the demon Hiranyaksha and the boar incarnation of Vishnu, Varaha. So sage Maitreya now goes into a little deeper story, the backstory, right? He talks about how Brahma had, first he'd had the initial 4 Kumaras, then he'd had that one son that was born Rudra, who was angry, and then there were 10 more sons that were born, one of whom was Daksha. Daksha, one of his daughters, got married to Shiva. The other daughter, he had many daughters and sons, but one of his other daughters, Diti, was married to the sage Kashyap. Now, this is a very interesting story because the sage Kashyap is very detached from the world. He's into meditation. He's a detached kind of guy, but he values his wife. And as he says, you'll see that in a moment. But one evening, Diti wanted to have sex with her husband. And she says, "Oh, learned one, Cupid." Now just notice the language. It's just beautiful to hear this, right? It's not from a place of need. It's just a beautiful way of asking. So she says, Diti says, "Oh, learned one, Cupid is taking his arrows and distressing me forcibly, as a mad elephant troubles a banana tree." So think of a banana tree and the elephant is like pulling on that banana tree, right? "I am much distressed by seeing the opulence of my co-wives." I guess they already had kids, and this was a time where you had, a man may have had many wives. She says to him, "A husband like you will become famous by having children because you are meant for the expansion of living entities." Now that's what Brahma had instructed them to do, is to have children, to have progeny and fill the world with people. So she's giving him all the good reasons that they need to have sex and have a kid, but she's in this strong moment of desire. And so the sage Kashyap, who she's married to, says, "I shall forthwith gratify whatever desire is dear to you, but for who else but you is the source of the 3 perfections of liberation?" Now he goes into appreciating her. He wants to tell her what a wonderful person she is. He says, "As one can cross over the ocean with seagoing vessels, one can cross the dangerous situation of the material ocean by living with a wife. A wife is so helpful that she is called the better half of a man's body because of her sharing in all auspicious activities. A man can move without anxiety, entrusting all responsibilities to his wife. As a fort commander very easily conquers invading plunderers by taking shelter of a wife, one can conquer the senses, which are unconquerable in other social orders, such as if you're a sannyasi, if you've renounced the world or something, or become a priest and, renunciate. O queen of my home, I could not repay you for what you have done, even if I worked for my entire life or even after death. Even though it is not possible to repay you, I shall satisfy your sexual desire immediately. But you must wait for a few seconds so that others may not reproach me. This particular time, now this was actually the time of sunset, just after the sunset. This particular time is most inauspicious because at this time the horrible looking ghosts are visible. So at that time, that's what they call, when they say the veil is very thin, and the different entities are visible and may have an influence. So you don't do auspicious activities at that time. You do them. The best time for any auspicious activity is considered early in the morning, like Brahma Muhurt, which is about 4 o'clock in the morning. That's the most auspicious time of day. And from there all the way until sunrise. But then again, the day begins and there's so much to be done. So he says, that particular moment is just nice. He says, let this moment pass and then we'll have sex, and that's fine. But she was really pushing it. So he says, he continues there. At this time, Shiva, the king of the ghosts, sitting on the back of his bull carrier, travels, accompanied by all the different entities who follow him for their welfare. See, he is actually their liberator. All these demonic entities and ghosts and so on and so forth, he liberates them. And so they follow him. Shiva's body is reddish and he is unstained. He is unaffected by all this. Shiva is one of the most incredible beings of all, unaffected by the world, completely in his trance, in his meditation, in his love for God. But he is covered with ashes. His hair is dusty from the whirlwind dust of the burning crematorium, and he sees with his 3 eyes. So he spends a lot of time in the crematorium. Why? Because the crematorium is the place of the greatest truth. The crematorium, especially the way you have it in India, where the bodies are burnt on a pyre made of wood. So they have wood and maybe even some sandalwood, and then they put the body on that, and then they burn the body there. And so when you face that, you face death. You face the ultimate reality of life. It's not something that you take and put in a coffin, make it pretty. You see the dead body for what it is. Ashes. Ashes. Dust. And so therefore Shiva spends a lot of time in the crematorium for himself and for those who follow him to see the reality of existence. And that's where this body will land up. Focus instead on that which is real and that which is the soul. So this is a picture of Shiva riding his bull Nandi. And that's a picture, And this is a picture of Shiva in meditation. And here's another one. And here's a picture of Shiva in his dance, the Tandav, where he's killing off the demons and destroying the entire creation so that it can get started all over again. Shiva regards no one as his relative, yet there is no one who is not connected with him. He does not regard anyone as very favorable or abominable. We respectfully worship him. Although no one in the material world is equal to or greater than Shiva, and although his impeccable character is followed by great souls to dismantle the mass of nations, he nevertheless gives salvation to all devotees. Unfortunate foolish persons, not knowing this, not knowing that he is immersed in his own self, laugh at him. Immersed in his own self means he's in deep trance in meditation all the time. Such foolish persons engaged in maintaining the body which is eaten by dogs at the end of life, or decorate the body with dresses and ornaments, garlands and ointments. They don't realize who Shiva really is. He is the controller of the material energy which causes the creation of the material world. He is great, and therefore his devilish characteristics are simply imitations, sort of delusions. All right, so back to Diti, right? Diti has managed to convince her husband to have sex with her, and being consumed by Cupid for sexual satisfaction, she has caught hold of the great sage's clothing and obliged him to perform the forbidden act. Kashyap went along. He offered his respects to worshipable fate and lay down with her in a secluded place. Later on, realizing her mistake, Diti came with face lowered and begged her husband, saying, "Kindly see that my embryo is not killed by Shiva because of the great offense I have committed against him. I offer my obeisances unto Shiva, who is simultaneously ferocious and the fulfiller of all material desires. He is all auspicious and forgiving, but his anger can immediately move him to chastise. Let him be pleased with us, since he is my brother-in-law." So her sister was actually married to Shiva. Sati is her name, or Parvati. He is also the worshipable Lord of all women. Kashyap, her husband, said, "Because of your minds being polluted, because of defilement of the particular time, because of your negligence of my directions, everything was inauspicious. You will have 2 contemptuous sons." So now he can see the future. He's able to see what's going to happen. So he says, "You will have 2 contemptuous sons who will cause constant lamentation to the universe. They will kill poor, faultless living entities. They will torture women, and they will enrage the great souls, the mystics, the sadhus, the rishis, the saintly people. This will go on for 100 years. At that time, the Lord of the universe, the Supreme Godhead, Vishnu, who is the well-wisher of all living entities, will descend and kill them personally. Because of your lamentation, penitence, and proper deliberation, and also because of your unflinching faith in God and your adoration for Shiva and me, one of the sons, Prahlad, of your son, Hiranyakashipu, will be a great devotee of Vishnu." So in other words, her grandson, right, will be a great devotee of Vishnu. And his fame will be broadcast equally with that of the Supreme Being. This child is of the name Prahlad. There are stories of Prahlad. We'll be reading them as we go along in the Bhagavatam. How he was tormented by various beings who tried to kill him, and how he eventually became the king. So there's a lot. Yeah, the story of Prahlad is quite fascinating. In order to follow in Prahlad's footsteps, saintly persons will try to emulate his character by practicing freedom from animosity. That's what Prahlad stood for, freedom from animosity. Though his father was one of those demonic beings who was harassing the entire universe and hated his son because his son loved God. He wanted to kill his son, actually. But Prahlad practiced freedom from animosity. Just like Christ says, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." This was done by Prahlad tens of thousands of years before Christ, and with his own father, and no less. Just as so great saintly people will follow in his footsteps. Everyone will be pleased with him, because the Supreme Godhead, who is always satisfied with the devotee who does not wish for anything beyond him. In other words, everybody goes to God wanting something from God, but Prahlad was one of those people who wanted nothing from God. This is called Nishkama Bhakti, bhakti or devotion, which has got no reason. I want nothing from you. I love you because of you. I love you for you. Isn't that how we all want to be loved? So when you love God like that, with no ulterior motive, not what can I get from you, but I love you and you can treat me any way you like. You keep me any way you like. I love you and I will not leave you. That was the kind of love Prahlad had. And because he had that, Vishnu, the Supreme Being, and above, of course, Vishnu comes from Krishna, was extremely pleased with him. Prahlad will be the topmost devotee of Vishnu with expanded intelligence and will be the greatest of the great souls. Due to mature devotion, he will undoubtedly be situated in transcendental ecstasy and will enter the spiritual world after quitting this material body. He will be a virtuously qualified reservoir of all good qualities. He will be jolly and happy in others' happiness, distressed in others' distressed, and will have no enemies. So you see, in this you get to see the qualities of a highly evolved being. He will be jolly and happy in others' happiness, distressed in others' distress, and will have no enemies. He will be a destroyer of the lamentation of all the universes, like the pleasant moon after the summer sun. Your grandson will be able to see inside and outside the Supreme Godhead, Supreme Being. The Lord can assume the form desired by the devotee, and his face is always beautiful. Okay, so anyway, the sage Maitreya said, hearing that her grandson would be a great devotee and that her sons would be killed by Vishnu, Diti was highly pleased in mind. So what appeared to be terrible news, that she had done this terrible thing, behind it, if you could see the future, was something incredible waiting in store. But a lot of pain would be endured before that tremendous thing would arise. So very often in our lives, we see that we mess up, we do crazy, stupid things. And we think that this is the end of the world, but in fact it's not. In fact, behind that is great learning, are great lessons, are great opportunities for us to grow and evolve. And as we take advantage of those things, life starts to move in a different direction. We need to trust life, and I think that's the big takeaway from today, is learning to trust that God has your back, that it's not just about your desires, but it's saying, what do you want and how can I serve you? All right, with that I'll end, and I'd like to take up any questions that you might have. If you've written them down in the comment, that'd be great. If you haven't, please take a moment and do so. I'd love to hear from you. I do answer all comments, so whether you're seeing it now or in the future. Please feel free to ask any questions you might have. Please feel free to like the videos and watch them on YouTube, because I love to hear from you. I love to stay connected in that way. All right, let's see what we've got going on. I'll switch over to on our YouTube, on our Zoom side. Okay. I've got a great comment from Cindy here. Let's put it over here. Oh, it's quite big, so let me try to move it. Okay. Cindy writes, seems what we attract is a replication of all three demigods' influences. We create, maintain, and destroy for the experience of it all. Depending on how we process these, it's a means of growth or delay. In this way, do we realize our soul and evolve. Characters, both physical and spiritual, as depicted in the Vedas and other teachings, generate many lessons and probabilities of understanding. Yes, Cindy, thank you so much for saying that. I do agree. I never thought of it this way, but I think it's a wonderful insight that we too create, maintain, and destroy. Right? We too, and as long as we realize that this is consciously happening, then we won't be attached to anything in particular. I think it's a great takeaway, is to recognize this cycle of creation, maintenance, and destruction that is there in all things. It is part of our life. Even this body, you might dress it up, you might decorate it, you might put on your makeup, or you might put on whatever else you do, right? Nice clothes, whatever. But then as you might maintain it by being healthy and being fit and eating well, but also recognize that in time it will be destroyed. It will start to get old. It will start to wear out. And that's okay. That's how it's meant to be. Just as the universe goes through that process, so do we. Great observation. Appreciate that a lot. Rima is writing here. Bharti, I think. Yes. Nice to be back, Rohit. I'm happy to be hearing these stories from my childhood at my grandmother's knee. Wow. So you heard the stories in your grandmother's knee. How wonderful that is. Now you get to hear the deeper meaning and the philosophy behind it. In India, I too grew up with many of these stories from my grandparents. And it's such a delight to be able to hear them and get to the deeper meaning of what they were all about. Because sometimes you just think of them as stories, and then you have all these people in our schools and others who just, it's just mythology. It's nothing. It's just dismiss it. No, but that's the Western thinking that has, wanted to put itself as supreme and everything else as somehow inferior. And the truth is, the wisdom contained in these texts is just out of this world. If you start to understand it deeply, you realize that there is something here that is not to be found anywhere else. And whatever else there is, by all means, take it from there too. But take wisdom from wherever you find it. If you find gold in a pile of muck, in a dirty pool of water, take it out. It doesn't get affected. The gold is not affected by that dirty pool of water, or the trash for that matter. So wherever you find wisdom, whether it's from these books, or whether it's some homeless person, or an old person, or a child, take it from wherever you get it. The idea is, don't dismiss anything. Everything that happens in our life is teaching us something. Every word, everything we come across has something. Keep looking, keep noticing, keep observing. Look for the needle in the haystack, the gold in the pile of muck. Don't dismiss things because they seem different or foreign. Anyway, thank you all so much, and I wish you all a wonderful new year. May this be, as always, the best year of your life. And I thank you so much for your support and your participation and for being here, whether you're hearing it now or later on a YouTube recording. Thank you so much. Just know that I am here to serve you with the deepest of humility. I do not pretend to be all-knowing or have some great spiritual insight, just trying to do a little seva. And in that seva, I hope I can be of some help to all of you. So thank you so much for your support and your love. Happy New Year. Jai Shri Krishna, Jai Shri Radhe Shyam. Thank you, Cindy, for your wonderful words. Happy New Year.